Yeah.
All right. So, hi everybody. Welcome to our now not so new series of international webinars called New Leisure Studies, International Perspectives. We are very happy to have such a great panel with us today, and this webinar is organized by five different organizations from across the world to kind of present and discuss different topics that are contemporary and of value for all of us living in this contemporary world. So the organizations you see here on screen, ANZALS, CULS, LSA, TALS, and World Leisure Organization. And this webinar will be recorded, so please keep that in mind. And the recording will be available. I will share the link in chat. All the recordings for previous and future webinars, information about future webinars is posted on TAL's website and also circulated through the listservs of these five organizations. My name is Irina Sharyevska. I represent Clemson University and the Academy of Leisure Sciences. And I have a couple of co-hosts here with me, Dr. Mona Mirehe from Indiana University and Dr. Shane Du from Western Michigan University. I believe she should join us if she's not here yet. I also would like to thank all of the organizations who helped in organizing this webinar, as well as the Global Relevance Committee, from the Academy of Leisure Sciences. I also would like to thank all of you who are joining us today on the panel or in the audience. And I would like to remind that while we have obviously experts here with us presenting their thoughts and ideas, we also want to hear from the audience. So please feel free to post your questions in a chat, and our panelists will try to answer them as we go and then in the end of the webinar. So the topic of today's discussion is technology and leisure research. And we have several presenters with us from different stages in their career. So we have first Dr. Carly Yeomans, who is a senior lecturer in the Department of Management and Marketing, Swinburne University of Technology in Australia, representing ANZALS. We also have Erin Rate. Correct me, I'm sorry, mispronouncing your last name, who is a PhD student at Peter School of Leadership, University of Alberta, Canada, representing CULS. We also have Dr. Nathan Williams, Assistant Teaching Professor, Department of Parks and Recreation and Tourism Management in North Carolina State University, United States, representing LSA. We have Dr. Ingrid Schneider, professor in the Department of Forest Resources, University of Minnesota, United States, representing TALS. And we also have Dr. John Dattila, Professor Emeritus, Department of Recreation, Park and Tourism Management in Pennsylvania State University, USA, representing World Leisure Organization. So thank you all for being with us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we could see our panelists much better. Here we go. And as I said, we have several questions that are prepared kind of for the discussion, but we also encourage our participants to kind of join in into discussion and contribute and ask questions, provide commentary, and so on. So our first question for the panelists, please describe the novel technology and how you're using this technology in your recreation, leisure sport, whatever subfield of our fields you're part of research. Is there any particular order that the panelists would like to speak, or should I just go kind of in the same order?
You're running the show, Irina. We trust you.
All right, let's go. Let's go. We'll start with Carly, if that's okay, since you were first on my list.
You can. When you said that, I was like, oh no, that means I'm first. Hi everyone. I am Carly, and thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to join this discussion and well, now kick off the discussion. Um, I took a bit of a leap and kind of assumed that we'd be doing a lot of talking about artificial intelligence across the panel. So I took the question in a bit of a different direction because something we're doing a lot more of in our leisure works is just looking at how to automate systems and bring different technologies together for efficient data collection. And the way we've done that most recently is we had a project that was very interested in measuring participants' subjective well-being after they'd exercised. And traditionally, a lot of the papers in the field that we were looking at had taken a self-report of behaviors that people would do throughout the week, and they would send surveys because we were looking at experience sampling methodologies, and would send people surveys after they said they would typically do exercise. So for some adults, it might be they played community sport and they trained on a Wednesday and they played on a Saturday. So they were like, okay, well, we'll send them surveys on those days once they've done activity. But now with what really isn't novel technology, but better access to the systems around technologies, we thought, well, let's take what we already know how to use and connect the systems a little more efficiently so that we can ask people the questions that we want to ask when they've done activity, or at least when our systems have triggered that they've done activity. So we took Fitbits and got a developer account. We use normal Qualtrics systems with SMS, and we used a middleman postman in this particular project's occurrence, and just made sure that when the participants were wearing their Fitbits during the study and the Fitbit recognized that activity had taken place, that let our system know, hey, this person has done some activity. It then triggered our survey system, and we were able to send that survey closer to real time. It's not perfect. It was only checking it every hour. But it enabled us to collect a lot more data, a lot faster, a lot less invasive, and remove some of that bias that might have otherwise come through. So I guess that was the example that I thought might be relevant to talk through today. Not necessarily novel technology by any means. We've been using wearable devices forever. If you're a quant researcher, you've been using Qualtrics or some other survey system forever, but being able to effectively deploy APIs to get those systems to talk to each other is something that we're doing a lot more of, and I think is enabling us to collect some more authentic data in the leisure space.
Thank you. This is great. And novel technology obviously does not have to be something invented yesterday, but it has to be a novel approach, novel application, novel kind of use of these systems. So thank you so much. This is a great example. Our next speaker is Erin. Would you like to share your thoughts?
Yes. Hi, folks. Thank you. And thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to learn from all of you through this conversation as well. And I think it's actually really great that I'm following Carly because my work currently also focuses on self-tracking, but from a little bit of a different perspective. So my work focuses on self-tracking in sport and fitness context. So, right, your Fitbits, your smartwatches, right? We have this whole constellation of apps now around health and fitness. But I look at how those technologies are shaping our understandings of health and self and embodiment. And so my framing of this is a lot less of, these are tools that we're using, but instead I'm positioning these technologies as active participants in shaping how we interpret effort, recovery, safety, and identity in sport and recreation. So it's less about the use of the technology in many ways and more about our relationship to it. And then, in addition to my work at the University of Alberta, I also work as a research coordinator at a local community hospital in Northern Ontario. So I'm coming to you from actually Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, Canada right now. And so as part of that work, I've also been trying to think about how I might integrate some of these same perspectives into these hospital-based environments. So questions around ethics, usability, patient agency, seem to be especially important these days. But I'd say across both of these settings, really a goal for me has been shifting self-tracking from something that's like surveillance-based towards something that's more care-centered, focusing more on participant-led forms of knowledge production. And I found that by embodying those values, it's led to some really cool projects in the healthcare space as well. So, for example, recently our team has been working on an AI avatar for wayfinding and greeting in hospital settings, but it's also culturally specific. So we're working really closely with our Indigenous community members so that they can see themselves in that technology. And then also other things like developing a virtual emergency department queue. So folks can wait at home. They don't have to come into the hospital. These are less leisure focused, but so I'll leave it there for now. But if folks do have questions about any of those projects, I'd be happy to answer them later.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Such an interesting and diverse, I guess, very kind of applications, right, for the technology. And definitely some of it can really kind of fluctuate between area of leisure, kind of going in and out, right? Somebody who can stay longer at home can probably scroll through social media a little longer. So anyways, Nathan is going to be our next presenter. So thank you, Nathan, for joining as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, and great to meet y'all that I haven't so far. Uh, so I'm a teaching faculty, so I spend most of my days thinking about students are stuck in this classroom. I might have an hour and 15 minutes, can't do a field trip in that time. What are the immersive learning solutions that can get them out of the classroom, maybe be creating something or engaging on different platforms, in lieu of let's get on a bus and spend a day doing things that we don't have time to do. So because of that, a lot of my research does revolve around virtual reality and augmented reality. But I think we should be doing more of this in leisure perspective. Uh, we should all think of using a VR headset and then 360 video with this very now affordable tool to think about how we can get leisure participants in other places. So not just studying like VR as leisure, but this is a great tool to record participants doing leisure in other countries and then immersing folks to experience empathy for their recreation circumstances and study that or study other outcomes or explore certain themes depending on what kind of research methodology you're coming from. So for my purposes, right, like I do a lot of like scholarship of teaching and learning, so it's finding out like when students are going to make 360 video and then seeing that in a VR headset, how does that impact the way that they perceive their own recreation behaviors or themselves as future recreation professionals? But I don't have like a degree in IT, or something like that. But I do have like libraries that have 360 cameras. And so I feel like as a field in general, I think we can be doing a lot more with immersive technologies related to leisure and not just as the form of leisure. Like I think scholars, yeah, could be adapting this technology to put our participants in other places. And happy to talk more about how to do that or provide resources.
Awesome. And I'll promote our own virtual reality lab here at Clemson. And
Yeah, Matt Browning doing, yeah, and Olivia.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
So definitely there's lots of application and lots of cool ways to kind of connect it to our research, right? And our teaching, which I love. You just given all of us some good ideas for next semester.
Mhm.
All right. So Ingrid, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. Thank you. Delighted to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Fun to hear what folks are interested in doing. I'm switching gears a little bit and talking about safe leisure settings and streamlined environmental data collection using robots. So, as we know, robots are increasingly wheeling into or walking through or otherwise entering our worlds, and this socio-technical transition presents automated systems, as Carly talked about, and robotic systems that can bridge the gap in our diminishing number of leisure and park personnel, address the deficit of dollars in our maintenance accounts, and then meet monitoring mandates that agencies have. And we are at a turning point where decisions about human-robot roles are prominent and increasingly pressing in our fourth industrial revolution. So I'm exploring these turns and pressures specifically in outdoor leisure spaces, focused on water-based and ground-based robots. And so the novel technology I've explored most in depth so far with Doctors Junaid Sattar and Amy Kinsley here at the U of M is a low-cost, open-source underwater autonomous vehicle, or LOCO. And the case of it is I'm exploring the acceptability and intention to use LOCO to monitor water bodies for common water quality metrics and invasive species. So LOCO is about the size of a carry-on suitcase, weighs 27 pounds, can work 2 hours on its batteries. It can dive up to 300 feet, and it can work connected to a tether or unconnected. And my colleague is perfecting diver robot interactions with gesturings and following commands, like how a dog follows you, the robot could follow you potentially. Yeah, so that is the technology that I have been working with most closely. And I have the responses to the other questions, but I think those are coming later.
That is amazing. You just took us to a whole new level of fear and panic. But I mean, in all seriousness, these are all amazing technologies, and I'm glad that there is variety represented here today because obviously, while we want to apply them and want to use them and very excited about all the opportunities, right, we also want to keep in mind potential challenges and think critically about all of that, right? So we'll get to that in a second, but I would like to also hear from John, who would be our last but not the least presenter for this first question.
Well, thank you. And it is clear that diversity is ever present in technology. And I will add to that diversity. I'm going to pop in to the message board a few studies that we've recently done. One set of studies and research. I too, like Nathan, have been involved in education, but not only education for university students, but education for people that have challenges experiencing leisure, so leisure education. And throughout the years, we've looked at a variety of ways of what's the best way, what are some ways to facilitate that learning. And recently, we've seen that many older adults across the world are living in environments where there are not professionals working with them. There are paraprofessionals and aides that work with them who don't have a lot of training. So we developed a video-assisted leisure education program and looked at the effects of those programs to help older adults increase their leisure satisfaction, their participation, their enjoyment in life, their reduction in loneliness. In addition, a third study, related study, is that grew from these video-assisted programs are studies that are connected with Shin Kono and crew from Canada that we've worked collaboratively together to develop online leisure education for university students. So the video assisted were for older adults. This program is for college students. So one cluster of studies that we've been working on throughout the years, this is just some of the more recent examples, is associated with leisure education. The other cluster that I just wanted to share with you briefly is we have been looking at people that use digital leisure with Liang Chang and a team from Taiwan. And we look at the connections between digital leisure and individuals getting into flow, their social inclusion, and seeing how people can use digital leisure to really enhance their leisure lives. So those are kind of two clusters that we've been looking at, people that wanting to learn about leisure and using technology to help them. And then the other cluster, looking at people that use technology to experience leisure and how that facilitates positive emotions and impact.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. And please, everybody, if you have anything to share, any articles that are already published or works in progress that you would like to have feedback, sometimes people do that through a variety of systems. Please do feel free to share with our audience. So thank you all for answering our first question and introducing largely the technology that you've been using. And then our next question is, how have the managers or research participants potentially responded to the technology? So in some cases, it will be potentially students. In some cases, potentially can be, just supervisors of some certain water body or whatever we kind of working with. So just present kind of reactions that you've been receiving and kind of your thought process around that. And we will start with Carly again, if everybody.
Sure. I would say, broadly speaking, very positive is the response that we've been getting across lots of different technologies. For the specific example that I mentioned before, participants were quite happy because they were incentivized and they got to keep the Fitbit. So that was always going to be a good news story, that one. But a lot of our other tech-based projects have involved either community sports clubs or councils and local government in Australia who don't have the time or necessarily the resources to engage with artificial intelligence or large language models or whatever it is that they're doing in the space, and perhaps are instead doing it in ways that aren't as regulated or aren't as safe from a data sharing perspective. So if we're able to share what we know in our university groups is the best practice data lake that they can access easily and faster and make sure that the information they're getting is correct, and we're reducing hallucinations as much as we can. The response so far has been really positive across those projects, and if we can leverage that to get real-time data of how people are engaging with those technologies and what they want out of it so that we can help them better serve their community groups in a way that isn't resource intensive. We haven't had a negative reaction to that, with the only caveat being when we're working with community sports and volunteers, it's kind of like the nth degree of time poor. And in those groups, it's been a little more tricky to get that buy-in just because the burden of their efforts is already so large. So we've been thinking really creatively lately about what those recruitment strategies look like and how we can help them to see that for a little bit of effort, there's a lot of return. And I don't think we've perhaps nailed what that recruitment strategy looks like yet, but hopefully we will soon so that we can continue to do that work. Because I think, like, from an organization level perspective, the buy-in has been great. From a participant level perspective, the buy-in has been great. Perhaps sometimes that middle level of people on the ground to get it up and running has been where our challenges sat bringing on those new technologies. But very happy to chat further if that triggers anything for anyone.
And your participants, is that for most part, what is the age group that you're kind of working with?
Oh, great question. For community sports projects, it's typically like the 16 to 18 direct, or their parents and the people that are volunteering in those community settings. For the Fitbit study, it was 16 plus. We weren't really particular what that looked like, but they did have to be members of the gyms or the community fitness centres that were engaged in that study. So the age scope has been pretty large, always over 16 for us so far, though.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. All right. So our next presenter is Erin. Would you like to share your thoughts about kind of feedback that you've been receiving?
Absolutely. So first, just for some context, for the project that I mentioned earlier, my participants were women and non-binary folks, and these are folks who were already familiar with the technology. They've self-tracked before. In fact, it was criteria for them to participate. But I think what was most I guess, interesting about their responses was um, what they thought about the reflection process in and of itself when they were actually actively asked to reflect on their relationship with these technologies. So a little bit more context, as part of my research process, I conducted what I called rolling interviews. They were bike ride interviews. I mic'd everybody up. We went for bike rides. We recorded as we rode, and then we hosted a culminating cycling retreat where we did bike tours, focus group activities, conversations, and we all sort of collectively analyzed the interview data together and talked about it. And one thing that came up over and over in our conversations was like, I never was really consciously thinking about this before. I wasn't thinking about my relationship with my smartwatch, with my Fitbit, whatever the thing was. And if you asked me initially, I would have said that this was something completely benign. Like, yeah, whatever, it's my watch. But now that you're asking me to think about this a little bit more, I'm realizing that maybe there is a certain level of control there, or yeah, just different musings about that relationship. And a lot of folks would comment things about how the process itself of that reflection of their relationship, for some it was validating, for some it was empowering. And in many ways, the conversations became so much more about the self-tracking. So, John, I loved when you mentioned, looking at digital leisure to enhance your leisure lives. Because I really felt like I saw that coming through in these responses from the participants as well. Like it started with self-tracking and it turned into, complex conversations around motherhood, around our bodies, around safety, around how these technologies are shaping their understandings of leisure or mediating those leisure experiences. So, yeah, I think that was for the most part, it was the actual thinking about the relationship that came through with participants.
Awesome. And I can also see, a little different kind of perspective from the standpoint of being worried about being tracked, right? And not feeling necessarily safe because of that, right? Or enhancing your safety by sharing maybe your location with somebody and things like that. So awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So Nathan, you're the next.
Yeah, so I research, but also teach college students. So that's who I spend the most time around. But I think, when we think about virtual reality, we might think, oh, well, I'm sure college students have done that, right? Or I'm sure they're familiar with that because they're familiar with all the new technologies. I hear this at conferences all the time. People are like, oh, I'm sure college students have done that before. But by and large, I usually only have a couple of students in my research studies and also in my classes who have any meaningful experience with VR beyond like a jump scares video that their friend showed them, or playing like Beat Saber when their friend had a Quest or something. But even more so than that, very few research participants, students, people at conferences have ever seen 360 video in a virtual reality headset. And so I think because of that, there is this potential for increased engagement with research participants. And yeah, there's definitely things to be studied about virtual leisure and meta leisure through VR headsets. But I think that, since it is such a still burgeoning technology, but also one that people might think, oh yeah, that's just video games, right? I think that has kind of an increased potential for like sneaky impact if folks put it to use. So yeah, for the most part, I'm hearing like people haven't done it before, but then when they do have like a 360 video of a nature setting or one where people are doing things like an instructional recreation video, they're usually like blown away by the clarity of it, and yeah, and the ways that it can be engaging. Because for some reason, I think in our heads, we think virtual reality is like almost like blocky computer graphics or something, or like what you see in Minecraft or something like that. So I do think that folks usually are surprised by, yeah, how, clear and high resolution 360 video has become, and also like how easy it is to make, how easy it is to produce for VR headsets.
That's awesome. Nothing here sounds super easy, but it's definitely beneficial and definitely could be used, right, for a variety of purposes. So thank you for sharing. And Ingrid, would you go next, please?
Yes, absolutely. So, in terms of the underwater robot and managers' response to it, it's received mixed responses from the managers. Excuse me. I will say that we are working to co-create what we're calling a public interest technology, which is a newish terminology. But so we did interviews with managers who had mixed responses. They heralded the advanced productivity that it could afford, right? So it's saving them time. And then they simultaneously are questioning both its safety and complexity of it. So in terms of the time, they really appreciated that they could collect more information more quickly whenever they wanted. They can go into places maybe humans couldn't safely access. Simultaneously, one of the reasons people get into outdoor recreation, nature-based environmental settings is because they want to be outside. And so it's in a way taking away some of the job perks potentially in that space. In terms of safety and complexity, safety was both for the user and for the robot itself. They don't want to lose the robot. They don't want the robot to get stuck. They don't want boating. They don't want divers. They don't want anglers to run into it or be surprised. And so that relates to some aesthetic concerns and privacy concerns as well. So someone asked me for a picture of the robot, and I can put a link or whatever. But there was really quite differences in what the robot should look like in terms of being fitting into the environment so it wouldn't impact the species in the water or other things that they would get confused, but then also not wanting people to run into it or touch it or hurt themselves. And in fact, we did hear some folks say anything they don't want visitors to touch, they put a like danger sign on. So, and they're in robot design, it's a whole field, obviously, but there is a kind of a happy place in a mix. It can't be too realistic or too cartoonish. So there's certainly a balance to find there. We do also have some initial data from visitors. We did interviews with visitors in water-based settings who similarly had mixed, but mostly positive responses about this, as long as it didn't interfere with their activity, particularly fishing. So, but people saw quite a few advantages, and our survey data that we have launched and just recently started analyzing indicates, except in the most primitive settings, people at least are stating acceptability for them.
Thank you so much. We're just now starting to get used to the drones, right? Circling around parks, and now there's a new robot joining the crowd. So definitely all the interesting applications, and thank you all so much again for being here. So John, you are going to be our last speaker on this question.
Great. I have to say that this was my favorite question because having done a career of intervention work and looking at effects of programs, part and parcel to doing any kind of intervention is making sure that we talk to participants and get their reactions to what we're doing. And so specifically, the couple of studies that I had initially posted about looking at the effects of leisure education on older adults, I'm a fellow with the Center for Healthy Aging at Penn State, and Martin Lewinsky is the director, and Amy Lorick is the outreach promoter for that. And so what we did is that part of our studies was actually to collect data on participant reactions. And so I was able to look back and say that In the one study, participants rated their goal achievement and their program satisfaction very highly. In another study, they consistently rated their goal achievement and their program satisfaction highly again, but also reported really enjoying having a small group of peers to discuss problems and to seek support. They were very satisfied with the program helping them to learn to set goals and succeed at achieving those goals. So not only did we see significance in their satisfaction, their positive affects, their decrease in loneliness, those kinds of measures that researchers do, but in talking with participants, they specifically told us that they felt that it had an impact. And in fact, in working with college students with Shin Kono and crew, we also got feedback from them about the online leisure education, and they felt one of the conclusions from them was that it's very inclusive, that the leisure education delivered online addressed some students who had mobility issues and had limitations because of physical locations. And we know that there's an advantage of online learning, but the students actually expressed that and were supportive of that methodology. So I think that sort of sums up some of the participant reactions that we've had.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And how amazing it is that we are in all parts of the world talking to each other right now, right? So yes, crossing the distance, technology does help us with that a lot. And we certainly cannot underestimate the value of that. All right. So our last question, which potentially, with a little bit of focus on practical implications, maybe a little bit of thinking about what went wrong, what went well, and kind of to prevent, future users of these technology maybe to not repeat your mistakes, right? So all of that combined, maybe present like two pieces of advice for somebody who may be interested in using this technology in the future for research purposes. And Carly, you're first.
Back to me. Thought this was a really interesting question, and I might build a little bit off what John was just saying about going back to the participants and making sure to collect that information about how their experience was using the technology. And I am someone who can be distracted by shiny things. I like new technology and jumping from idea to idea if I think that it has some kind of cool application, but definitely the thing that I tried to hold myself true to and I remind myself is to always be passionate about answering the question and not about using the technology and making sure that it's fit for purpose. So for the Fitbit study, that was handy because subjective well-being is dynamic in nature. So it fit for purpose there. And when we've used the more large language style application, it's because the policy documents were robust and the information was there. It was just about accessing it in real time. So making sure that the question that you're asking calls for the technology is probably my tip first and foremost, and don't always get distracted by shiny things. But probably my second piece of feedback, like a little bit contradicts with that. And it's when new technologies are coming through or things that you're interested in, even if it's things like coding languages, not to necessarily take yourself out of that value chain too early and have a play first and see what skill set it is that we bring in leisure that the technology might not inherently already cover, because there's a lot that we do in leisure when we're talking to participants and understanding their experiences and their behaviors and their motivations, that the technology might be able to enhance and will enable you to further that research. So thinking about where you sit in that value chain and where technology can perhaps be an asset to that is something that does require planning. So I guess my tip would be to know enough about the technology to be able to have educated conversations about it and get help from professionals in that space if you need, or explore it yourself, but don't automatically perhaps assume that it's gonna be too hard, because a lot of it isn't now. So that probably would be my second tip.
I love it. Thank you so much. Both very good recommendations. I do think that a lot of times we do get intimidated, right, by some of the technology. And of course, it is very easy because of fast-paced development to assume that what we observed 6 months ago is still the same, right? And it's updating itself. Not itself, but with our help, human help, right? And sometimes itself, are you right, Ingrid? So we definitely need to check in and just, judging from very recent workshops that we had here at Clemson about AI, it's just absolutely amazing what the technology is capable of. So thank you so much, Carly, for such a great advice. Erin, would you like to go?
Absolutely. And Carly, that I love that you finished with, not to be intimidated by it per se, because I know that was something when I first approached this research. I wasn't sure if I could do it because I'm like, I don't have a background in computer science. A lot of the stuff I was teaching myself to learn about it, to learn about programming, but it wasn't really my background. My background's in sociocultural studies. And so at first I was almost psyching myself out of it from the project to begin with because I was like, I don't know, that might not be my wheelhouse. But really it is so much more approachable, I think, than folks realize, which I love that you brought that up. And I think building off of what you're saying about, there's so much that this tech might be able to enhance in our leisure studies, but also thinking about again where the technology might be less useful. Sometimes we don't need the tech, right? And so I think my first kind of bit of advice would be paying attention to what the technology, what it can't see, and sort of reflecting on our own assumptions about that technology. So I know, for example, in self-tracking context, this is going to privilege, measurable outputs like distance, pace, heart rate, but it's often going to miss those sort of relational or cultural or environmental dimensions of leisure and health. I'm sure most of you have heard of like the 10,000 steps a day, right? You heard that about a smartwatch. And this is just an arbitrary number, right? There wasn't any research to back this. It came from a Japanese company marketing a pedometer in the mid 1960s and translated the name of the pedometer with something like 10,000 steps meter. So really being critical of the choices that are made in the creation of these technologies, I think is really important. And it's actually what brought me to this research in the first place. So, before I started this project, I was working with some software developers to create an app that uses machine learning for falls prevention, so in a healthcare setting. And we're teaching the app with its training data. We rigged up myself a whole bunch of our RAs with sensors to, have the app learn sit to stand and all these different movement patterns. And while we were developing this app, the software developers would say things like, oh, I'm just going to cut this out because it's noise, or that movement pattern wasn't smooth enough, I'm going to get rid of that, or oh, this is just how the interface is going to be. And then the kind of sociologist in me is going like, well, wait a second, what counts as noise? What are you getting rid of? What kinds of information and data are you privileging here? So again, just kind of coming back to questioning those assumptions in those design choices. And then I guess my second one would be, and this one, I guess, might not relate to every research project, but it was really important for me in my process, was just making room for care, for play, for curiosity in research involving tech. Self-tracking, for example, it doesn't just have to focus on optimization or compliance or even critiques of that, which is what I found with a lot of literature on the topic. But I found that when framed differently, these tools, they could support reflection, storytelling, alternative understandings of movement and well-being. And, so more broadly, I think just as leisure researchers, remembering that research can be play, we can be playful with our research. I did those bike ride interviews in the cycling retreat. Sure, it fit with my methods and my theory, but it was also super fun. It was joyful. I'm a cyclist, so I loved doing it. And I really wanted to push against that rhetoric of, that research it's isolating or it's difficult or it's serious. So I really wanted to be playful with that research process and with the technology. So I guess that would be sort of my second point is play with the research a little bit and become familiar with it.
Awesome. I love it. And, it kind of second advice on not being intimidated. I love this because a lot of times, if we think about, if we just allow IT people to develop technology without any contribution from social sciences or behavioral scientists or leisure scientists, right? The world can become really scary. So it's our humane introduction into technology what really is important and meaningful and very, very valuable. And it's not done enough, in my opinion, at the moment. So definitely appreciate that second opinion on that. Absolutely. Nathan.
Yes, I think mine is probably a good dovetail on y'all's comments because I think amongst our group, right, who's panelists, we know that we always need to be constantly revising our understanding of new technologies, and learning about the latest thing, being attracted by shiny things like Carly and myself are. Um, but like, I think part of that is like, we really need to be fans, or like, we can be fans of technology and learn about technology. I think there's this old paradigm that like, I'm the scholar and I work with the developer or IT staff to develop the thing, and then it kind of gets stuck a little bit. And so I think because of that, my piece of advice that I was thinking of was I really feel like the more we can be choosing consumer grade technologies that can be like easily updated, that are sort of future proof, that we sort of know will probably stay updated. Like I use Insta360, 360 cameras, and there have been like 5 versions of it already. It's very unlikely that it's going away anytime soon. Whereas if I was Ingrid, I would be like, oh crap, what happens when the robot breaks? And I'm not saying like Ingrid shouldn't have the robot, but I think like we as individual faculty, maybe without funding to build robots, there's still like consumer grade technology that we can constantly be upgrading as we need to. So I think choosing that kind of stuff is very helpful. But also, I think some of what I heard today, I think will relate to this, that, yeah, the more we can incorporate design thinking around pilot studies and projects and be trying out the technology. And, there's this fail early, fail often idea in tech that I think also we should think about when we're integrating technology and leisure research. How can we try things out simply, iterate it, try it again in a few weeks, iterate it, and go through that design process that software folks are definitely used to when they're designing things. So just a couple of things that I would be thinking about.
Thank you, Nathan. Very practical. I love these advice, both very valuable. I do think if you can give it to your 3-year-old and to your grandma, and both of them can figure it out, you're probably good. So thank you so much. All right, Ingrid.
Yes, sure. Thank you so much. I think I'm going to elaborate on and maybe add to pieces that have been mentioned. So I would also advocate to come curious to the technology with an open mind and that critical evaluation of what progress or productivity augmentation it really affords either to your research or the work being done. And an example of that toward, shiny things and fun things to explore. I was recently attempting to get an agency to think about using a ground-based quadruped or robot dog for some environmental scans. And they're like, in the end, it's really not that useful. So, okay, darn it, but let's accept that. And what are some other things that can happen? Also with that curiosity and being open to alternative outcomes, maybe things you didn't expect. For example, I know of a beach robot that cleans microplastics out of beaches. And as it turns out, it doesn't do it all that efficiently, but it serves as an amazing engagement tool for folks at the beach. So then they are learning about plastics and pollution and how to keep the beach clean. So that was an unexpected outcome, I think, of that deployment. And interestingly, in Minnesota, I've recently learned that folks in the past 4 or 5 years have, since kind of we've been starting to work, and I'm perhaps in advance as well, but folks are purchasing their own aquatic robot that is teleoperated. It's not autonomous, but it's something that they can use, and they're exploring that. So that is interesting. So one piece of advice, come curious. And then my second piece would be to be persistent about the equitable deployment of the technology and robots in particular. I mean, I think technology has real concerns across different organizations and entities about not being equitably deployed or used. And so Loco, as a low-cost open source robot, illustrates the equitable opportunities. In theory, one can, get the pieces for like $4,000 or less and build it yourself. And, robot teams in high schools, all sorts of places are doing that. And then also toward the equity is the idea of the co-creation and integration of all interested parties, folks who might be at the parks, who aren't at the parks, the public, etc. So I think as we navigate these pressure points and turning points for robotics in particular, we really need to strive towards safe robotic deployment when the public supports it.
Thank you so much. And so valuable. I definitely been throughout thinking about some ethical issues and how it can be, right, used. And obviously equity is a big part of that, but there's so much more ethical questions, right, that could be answered. And whenever we work with technology, I think it's important to keep that in mind. All right. So, John, would you close up with that?
Quickly, yes, I'll bounce off that from Ingrid and you that the idea of ethics is very important. Remember, technology is only a tool, and social media, if anything, has taught us that a tool is mismanaged, that people don't think of ethics, can create all kind of trouble. So think about equity and inclusion for individuals, and think about ethics always overlapping our research with any technology. Technology is a tool. That's number one. Number two is that, like Aaron, I like when Carly talked about being intimidated by technology, because it really goes to what is a Buddhist principle of the idea of impermanence. And that I would suggest for me that what has been valuable over my career is to not hold on to stuff, but to let it go and embrace impermanence, in that tomorrow new technology is coming out. And I'm going to have to let go of the things that I learned and learn something new. And it's exciting, and it's just energizing. But the idea is that so many people want to hang on to what has been the past, and for us to let go of that and embrace impermanence.
And luckily, we're in the right career, right? When did the academics start learning? I mean, the moment we stop learning, we doomed. So definitely appreciate that thought. I do think that a lot of times, especially novel technology, does create a lot of fear, and I will rephrase that, because I think it's important to remain critical, right? And important to view all the possible, just like you said with social media, right? A lot of times, those anticipated consequences, we are the ones who bring in attention to them, right? So it's important to keep those in mind, but not necessarily at the detriment of just eliminating the whole technology. Instead, we can improve it and make it better and make it a more cautious and conscious, right, of differences in kind of the way we kind of should be using it for benefit and not detriment of society. All right, so we have just 5 minutes left. So if anybody in the audience has questions, feel free to just speak up or type them in the chat if that's easier for people. And I'll give everybody 1 minute, a few seconds to gather their thoughts.
It's like in the classroom when you're like, does anybody have questions before we wrap up for the day?
Well, I always have questions, so I'm gonna go ahead and ask you whether you see additional potential challenges, ethical issues, kind of related to use of your technology, and I can probably think of some, for each of you, but I would love to hear how you kind of thought about it, how you maybe justified, still using it, kind of the benefit overwhelms, right? Those potential challenges. So, ethics challenges, kind of in that realm, what would your comments be?
I mean, I've got a quick one, which would be now, obviously, we're living in a surveillance culture, and my department head, y'all probably know Russell Mowat, has written a lot about how technology is constantly watching, sometimes for not the best reasons. And so, yeah, so I am often thinking about with things like 360 video or things that are tracking behaviors, like what our obligations are to participants, or like I know Violet's cool videos from Winona State University. And yeah, thinking about like when somebody ends up sort of in a video, what are our obligations? And I think that sometimes we're like, oh, well, it's in public, you're agreeing to it, right? By being in public. But yeah, I think the more that we start seeing how video can be used in the days of AI, right? I feel like there's a lot of quandaries there.
Very good point. And there's certainly lots of surveillance and cameras that we are not even aware of, right? And so it's almost impossible to stay outside of kind of that digital world. Ingrid, did you have something to add?
Oh, I was just going to add my own ethical dilemmas about, although there's no rules about robots in most municipalities, I have refrained from bringing the quadruped dog to parks without a research permit, number one. And also just I don't want to freak people out and freak dogs out, to be honest.
Very good point as well. It's definitely unique and different, and everything that's unique and different tend to scare people. So I can see that. Arian?
Yeah, just adding on the ethics perspective, but from the perspective of our research ethics board, I know one thing that I've encountered in some reviews when I've been involving technology, um, is that depending on your research ethics board too, that you're applying through, like I applied through the University of Alberta, which is a big institution, but I also do work locally as part of our local research ethics board. And so not all of your research ethics boards are going to have maybe the expertise to deal with these kinds of things. So I think sometimes there's a bit of working back and forth with your REB through that. Because sometimes they'll have questions, or again, you're going to have folks who AI is new to them too. These technologies are new to them too, and you might not always have those experts. So kind of figuring out ways to navigate those situations when they come up. I don't know if that answered anything, but that's just one thing I've been noticing.
No, this is so true. And to be honest, I think IRBs are just not prepared for the amount of information that is coming at them, right, at all times. I mean, just recently, our IRB team kind of issued the statement about using AI and how in kind of, for transcribing, for data analysis, for all these purposes, because they start seeing so much more requests kind of for research using these tools. And so, definitely, we are inventing these rules and policies as we go. And Ingrid, for the most part, probably people don't have these rules just because not many attempts been made, right?
Well, they're coming.
Yes, exactly. So, Stephen, did I hear that there is a question? Unfortunately, we'll have to probably postpone since this is our end of the webinar. We only had until 5. But if speakers are willing to stay for another minute or two, we are definitely happy to communicate about your question in a more informal format. But I do want to thank all of you for being here, for joining us, for participating, and thank you to our panelists for providing such an insight into all the contemporary technology that can be used for leisure research. So thank you.
Thank you.